our guest really, I'm going to introduce him, although he really does not need much of an introduction. He is a Hall of Famer. He is a national championship winning coach at Youngstown State and the Ohio State University. And now he is the new president of Youngstown State University. So I'd like to bring on my guest today, President Coach Jim Tressel. Coach,
thanks, Justin. Good to be with you.
Absolutely. Well, we are so. I got to say, I'm just so grateful for you coming on today. You've always been a role model and, someone I've looked up to. So I really, again, appreciate you taking your time and joining us.
My pleasure.
I have a question about your announcement at the Schottenstein Center, which was one of your, most famous speeches, at least for Ohio State football fans, that you ever gave. That day when you were introduced as Ohio State head coach, and they handed you the microphone during that basketball game, did you know what you were going to say?
That was my first day on the job, and we had a press conference in the morning, and then we had a game that afternoon, and I knew they were introducing me at halftime. I didn't know that they were going to hand me the microphone, but when they did, the one thing I knew for sure was that one of the things that was most dear and dear to the hearts of Buckeye fans was that we hadn't been quite as successful against those folks up there as we would like to be. Mm-hmm. That I wanted our people to know that I knew that, and that our goal was to do something about that, and that unless you make something that you're going to emphasize, you don't get it done. So I just wanted people to know that was going to be an emphasis, and later, of course, it got billed as a guarantee, and all those.
Right.
It really was not that. It was just a recognition, and I wanted our players to know it too.
Yeah.
I've always believed that one of the things that you have to do in leadership is that you have to be willing to step out on Front Street and let people know where you would like to help them get. And I knew that was important. I knew that our seniors, for instance, had never won. And so I knew that was important to them. And, so what I thought was just a casual statement obviously grew into something even infuriated the people up there. But, that's all part of it. I like to look at history. When I was young, I didn't like history. As I got older, I did. And one thing that bothered me was whenever I saw the all-time series record, we were always way under 500. And I kind of made a little goal to myself, and I fortunately didn't say it out loud because they would have reminded me of it every day. But, one day I wanted to be alive when we were over 500. And I knew we were, 28, 30 games under 500. We did really poorly in the early days. I think we lost 20 of the first 22 or something. And we hadn't done well in recent history at that moment. And so we kept a little thing in our locker room that reminded people of where we were in the history of the rivalry. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we're within 7, 8, 9 games of 500. And based upon the trajectory I see right now, I might have my wish. I might be alive when we go over 500. We'll see.
I hope you get to that wish. So Coach, taking over and obviously changing the course of that rivalry, the 2002 team was obviously a very successful team. I was at Ohio State that year, and that's a year I'll never forget in my history, and being on campus and just the vibe around campus. What was special about that 2002 team that you had coached and taken on arguably one of the best college football teams in history in the Miami Hurricanes?
That first year we were there, it was get to know one another, and I felt like going into 2002. We knew one another, and I thought our coaches knew what our players could do best. We had an extraordinary recruiting class. And while I knew a lot of those guys wouldn't be stars their first year, we were going to have a lot of great players. And I don't know what it ended up, 4 or 5 first-round draft choices out of that class or whatever. Bunch of all Big Ten guys, all Americans. And so the combination, I think, of the veteran guys who wanted to do something special before they left Ohio State and the influx of new talent really created a competitiveness in practice that I think really helped us get better. Mm-hmm. And then as the season went along, we still were not a great team at the beginning of the year. But I think because of the tough schedule we played, the competitive practices that were there every day, we survived some real tight battles. I think going into that Miami game, we knew how good they were. They'd won 34 straight games. And what was ironic was we hadn't won the national championship in 34 years, and they had 34 straight wins going. And I thought, there's something, serendipitous about this. And we knew how good they were, and we knew they were very capable of beating us. The whole world knew that. But I'm not sure that the world knew that we were capable of beating them. And I think that was to our advantage. And our guys prepared extremely hard, and we were playing our best football at the end of the year, which is, when you need to do it. And that was always our discussion about the Ohio State-Michigan game, was for no other reason other than you ought to play your best game because it's your last game. And so that's a great time to be playing your best when you're playing your rival. And so it was just fun to watch kind of a growing together of 2 generations, our older guys and our younger guys. And as you say, it's a year you'll never forget.
Absolutely. So I have to ask this as being the head coach, being in charge of that program, either the night before or the morning of, is there a different feeling for you, or do you have a different routine than a typical, let's just say you're playing Illinois, is there a difference between playing an Illinois versus, the game? Do you have like a different feel in the morning or the night before?
Yeah, I learned when I was an assistant coach at Ohio State that there was a different feel about that game. And I remember the first Ohio State-Michigan game I coached in was in 1983 when I was an assistant, and we were playing up there, and both teams were good. Neither team was top 5, but both teams were really good. And I remember you could just tell there was something different about that game, so much so that the first time you're in it, you're almost like a little bit numb, that you've never had that feeling before.
Sure.
And so that was a good exercise for me, coaching in that game 3 times. I think it really helped as we came then to YSU and coached in, 28, 29 playoff games, and, 6 national championship games. And I think having had that Ohio State-Michigan special game experience, was certainly a benefit.
Okay, very good. Coach, I got to ask you about, your iconic look. You have the vest look. And where did that look come from, or did you just kind of have, that's kind of what you wore and it kind of became a thing? And follow up on that, do you still have any of those game worn vests?
Let me answer the second one first. Most of those game worn vests we gave out for charity.
Okay.
And so people with charitable auctions and so forth, and we would put what game it was, and we thought, that, to us it was another vest, but to someone who's a collector, it was a certain one. So no, I don't have many left. I've got a lot of sweater vests, probably 200 of them, because people everywhere I would go, whether it was a high school or a business or you name it, they would always give me a vest. And I don't know if they wanted me to advertise or what, but
sure.
The way it started, honestly, was as you recall, we played a lot of night games here at Youngstown State, and our stadium is the highest point in the city. And so it was always a little breezy in the ice castle. That's why we called it the ice castle. And it was always a little chilly, even early in the year. And so I wasn't ever one that liked to be cold. I was probably born in the wrong part of the country or something. I should have been born in San Diego or somewhere. But so I just wanted a little bit of extra warmth because I knew our games were going to go till 10 o'clock at night. And so that's just kind of what I wore. Now, when it got real cold, I wore a coat over it, but still had a sweater vest. But so when I got to Ohio State, one of the first meetings I had was with the equipment people and Nike and all that. And they said, okay, we got to decide your sideline wear. And I said, okay, and they said, well, what do you wear? And I said, what I normally wear is a sweater vest, but I'll wear, what do you want me to wear? And they said, oh, let's go with the sweater vest. That's a little different. So instead of being something I just did because I felt like it was something that became mandated. And even if it was 94 degrees on a noon game in late August in Ohio Stadium, I had to wear a sweater vest. I was like totally smoking at the time. But that was one of those marketing things that that Nike wanted to do. And then, of course, after we had a couple good years, people wouldn't let you not do it.
Right. Okay.
But I do like sweater vests in general.
Yeah. It's a good look. I had to ask you that question. I had a few friends that told me to ask you that too. So, Coach, this is more of a serious question on either being a coach or a president. So you're in the public eye a lot and you have to deal with adversity, whether it be, a loss to a rival or dealing with COVID-19. How do you best battle adversity in the public spotlight? What's your keys to success on that one?
I think whether it's adverse situations or not, I always felt being a coach that because we had a real tight window of 3.5 hours of that was our work. We did a lot of preparation, but our actual work week was 3.5 hours. And so I always felt like you needed to really keep good focus and that you really needed to keep good calm and an even keel, and that decisions had to be made so quickly. Decisions were, especially at a place like Ohio State, so very public. That I think the biggest thing was focusing on the moment, also not being afraid to say, hey, we could have done this better, and we've got to get to work on this, and we've got to straighten this out, and knowing that everyone in their line of work has to do the same thing, and ours is just public, and
sure.
And I think too, Justin, I always wanted to project to my team that we were under control. I think sometimes if you as the leader appear to be out of control, it's maybe a little bit of a license or just an observation of your staff and your team, that they could be that too, and that won't help us. So just like we used to tell our players, Justin, that when the play ends, you first assess, did you get your part? Did you do your job right?
Sure.
Second thing you do is look at the chains and find out the situation, what's the down and distance, what's the time on the clock, whatever. And the third thing is you get your eyes on the sideline for the next direction. And you can't fall into, being a hissy fit about what you didn't do well, or a bunch of animation, or let your mind, go in one direction or the other, too great or too disappointed.
Sure.
Because you got to play the next play.
Okay.
And, that's the way life is. Every day things aren't going to be perfect. every day, though, you can learn from them. And every day you can say, hey, I learned from today, and I'm going to be able to do better tomorrow.
Very good.
To me, that's the only way that it's healthy to face things.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's great life advice, not just coaching advice. Coach, going back to the game, going back to any sort of game, what do you have a particular game in mind that might have been the most exciting game you've ever been a part of?
You know, Justin, I always hesitate to answer those because as soon as I say one team's games, then I'm going to get texts and phone calls and everything. So, Coach, I can't believe you didn't think this or that. But, you know, I think whether it be in coaching or in a season or in business or in anything where you're really trying to get better and you work hard and you prepare and then you go out and test yourself, there are some breakthrough moments. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean they were more exciting than the others, but they were like breakthroughs that maybe gave a little proof to yourself or maybe a little proof to one another or to your fan base or to whomever that, you know what, we're getting better and we're going to be okay. And so I would say that probably in my head coaching career, our first year at Youngstown State, we were 1-9 going into the last game of the year, and we were playing our rivals, Akron, and they were, I don't know, 8-2 or something, and they were heading to the playoffs, and it took the entire game, but we ended up winning the game 40-39, and I think that was a breakthrough. I thought it really impacted the rest of our time at YSU, and I think similarly at Ohio State that first year, you know, we were, I think, 6-4. You know, that gave us some proof that we had a chance to be good, and so I would call those two breakthrough games. I'm not sure if they were the most exciting or what. They were pretty exciting, but I was fortunate. You know, I coached in 9 national championship games, and 13 Ohio State Michigan games, and 30 some playoff games, and so I was blessed to be in a lot of exciting games, but many times I reflect back on those breakthroughs.
Awesome. Very good. Coach, do you have, can you think, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but can you think of a player that you've coached against that might be, you would say, that's one of the top players I've ever coached against?
The one that immediately comes to mind is Philip Rivers. He was at NC State, and I'm not sure I've ever been on a field with a quarterback that did the things that he did. I think we ended up beating them in, if it was double overtime or triple overtime or something silly. But he was just amazing. And he was a classy guy. He was tough. We kept hitting him. And I was thinking the other day about when I was going through some of the NFL games, and I saw Cliff Kingsbury there with the Cardinals. Mm-hmm. And I remember when Texas Tech came to town in 2002, and he was a quarterback. And I remember, Coach D'Antonio told me, I think we had 28 hits on him that day.
Oh, wow.
Coach D'Antonio brought the heat, and we beat them pretty good. And they were, I think, favored in the game, or it was a toss-up or whatever. And he was a good player, but the most impressive guy I can remember, especially at a position like quarterback, was probably Philip Rivers.
Okay. All right. Very good. Coach, being a head coach, now, people don't understand the time, the work, the effort, and all the preparations that go into that unless you're in it. What would you say is probably the most difficult part of being a head coach, whether it's at Youngstown State or whether it's at Ohio State?
I think time management is probably the most difficult, because you're never out of things that you would really like to accomplish. And it's the same thing with being a president at the university. I mean, I just don't have enough hours in the day, to do everything that I would like to do on behalf of the institution. And but like you said at the outset, unless you think you don't understand it, and so I've always taken the approach to highly respect what everyone does. Everyone's role is huge. But I do know in the roles that I've had, the biggest opponent I've always had is time.
Okay. Coach, outside of football, do you have a favorite sport besides football?
Well, I'm not a very good spectator, so I don't sit and watch too many things. I loved playing volleyball. College intramurals, and I loved the game.
Okay.
And as you know, my youngest daughter was a Boardman Spartan volleyballer, and so I loved watching her games. So I've always liked the sport of volleyball. I've always liked wrestling. I was a wrestler in 7th grade, and then switched to basketball, but I went back to wrestling in college when I was in intramurals, and I just loved and I loved all the kids that I coached that were wrestlers, because I knew, they were used to being out there, man against man, can't blame it on anyone else. Their conditioning was extraordinary. And I love watching the Big Ten wrestling championships and, that kind of thing. But I'm not very patient. I can't go and sit and watch a whole game or I might,
right.
I guess ESPN was kind of invented for me, where you can find, the highlights, and you can see, what were the differential plays in a game or series or whatever. But I always liked volleyball and wrestling.
Okay. All right. And Coach, you're pretty active on Twitter, at least tweeting out a lot of inspirational type quotes. Do you have a favorite, and did you use that when you coached as well?
Well, one of the things is when I was done coaching, and I would still talk with my players quite a bit, and we always began every day with what we called quiet time. And so they used to tell me, Coach, we don't have quiet time anymore. And that used to really help me get my mind centered and whatnot. And they said, you got to figure out a way for us to keep having quiet time. So that's what we kind of did with Twitter. We start each day with just one thought, just to reflect on, just to get your mind going, perhaps in the right direction. And so that's why we do a quiet time post every day. And then what was the second part of the question?
So you use that now as...
Yeah. Well, what's my favorite?
Do you have a favorite one?
Well, yeah. I tell you the one that I have referred back to many times is paradise is where I am. And the reason is, so often, whether it was my players wishing they were in the NFL, or assistant coach wishing they could be a head coach somewhere, or if we were at a mid-level place like YSU, someone wishing they could be in the NFL or in the Big Ten or something. My advice to them always was, if you'll live by the quote that paradise is where I am, then you'll treat where you are properly. And if you do have the good fortune of maybe being somewhere where you've always dreamed about or whatever. But people used to ask me all the time when we got to Ohio State in the 2000s was that your dream job? And it really wasn't. My dream job when I was at Youngstown State was Youngstown State. I mean, that's all I thought about. I didn't allow myself to think, I wish I was at Cleveland Browns or wherever. And I think whether it's the job that you're in or whatever, if you will take that attitude with you, that's paradise, it doesn't mean you'll be there forever. But if you are, you will have treated it properly. If you're not, and you did get some opportunities that might have been considered promotions or whatever, it would probably be in large part because you carried the attitude of paradise is where I am.
Excellent. And I think that those are probably the perfect words to live by. Coach, I know I've kind of run over my time a little bit, but I just want to, again, say thank you for taking the time out of your day and joining us. And you're doing great things at Youngstown State. And, so go Penguins, go Buckeyes. And again, thank you again for coming on the show.
You guys are doing great things downtown. I think downtown and the university are becoming one, which is kind of, we used to always say that Youngstown was a city that happened to have a university. Now I like to say that Youngstown is a university town that happens to be in a city.
No doubt.
It's all one thing.
Absolutely. And we hope it just keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and keep doing what you're doing. We love to see it.
All right. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
All righty.